In today's B2B landscape, the balance of power has shifted. Buyers are more informed, more independent, and less responsive to traditional sales tactics. Yet many sales teams still rely on outdated, seller-centric playbooks that no longer resonate with modern buying behavior. To win in a buyer's world, sales strategies must evolve, starting with a deep understanding of who the buyer is, what motivates them, and how they want to engage. That's where buyer-first intelligence comes in. Hello everyone, welcome to Revenue Lounge. I am your host, Randy Likus, and in this episode, we'll dive into how sales teams can tap into personality-driven insights aligned around clean data and move beyond surface-level personalization to drive real results. And joining me today is Amarpreet Kalkat. Amarpreet is the founder and CEO of Humantic AI. His passion lies in making software intelligent and human. And he has some great insights into the buyer-first world that we would love to learn more about. Amarpreet, thank you so much for joining us today.
Randy, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I usually like to start these things and ask if you could maybe walk us through your background, your career journey, and what led you to start Humantic AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So, my journey's, it feels a little long now. I've started feeling a little bit old, I suppose. But I've been I would say, technology builder for a very long time, 25 years now, more or less. My first love, my first passion always was building. And a long time ago, much longer than earlier, most people, I got quite fascinated by AI. Wanted to build intelligent software. That was my thing. So post my MBA, wanted to be a product manager, build intelligent products, etc., etc. This is 2004-5, really. We're talking back in time. So fast forward around 2011, I still wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. So that's when I launched my first startup. I've now been doing AI. Technically, AI we started doing around 2014, but we started working with NLP and a whole bunch of linguistic problems around 2011, 2012. So this is my second SaaS startup, second AI startup, Humantic AI. I've been working with AI since 2014 very, very actively. Built models to now predict human behavior, built models to predict trends, done a lot of work with social data. And with Humantic AI, it's shaping up into quite an exciting journey. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's great. So I've heard you speak at a couple of different other podcasts and presentations that you've given at Dreamforce. And you mentioned a lot that we're living in a buyer's world. Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean for sales teams today? And how does this sort of buyer-first approach shift the sales strategy from maybe a traditional seller-driven world?
You're right. In some ways, it's always the buyer's world, and every top seller knows that you don't sell, you just help people buy, right? You'll have to be an extremely exclusive market, theoretically, where you could sell because there are no options available. Like even OpenAI barely had that advantage for months before all these competitors showed up. If you really think generative AI is super commoditized, right? There's dozens and dozens of companies that can give you essentially more or less the same thing. So that is how it's generally been. I think the balance shifts around a little bit. And at this point of time, there's just so many options. There's so much coming at, buyers. There's so many ways to solve the same problem. Like you and I, we are in the revenue space. We are a 20% startup that is competing with Salesforce for budget, right? Because the CRO is saying, yeah, I think I can buy Salesforce agents, right? And either they'll spend money there or they'll spend money here. So it's a lot more than ever. It's a buyer's world. I have so many choices as a buyer. I don't care a lot about what you have to sell. But the problem is that sellers are generally trained to do their thing, follow their method, follow their methodology, my med pick, my challenger, my this. Your buyer doesn't care, right? No. Your buyer doesn't really care about that. And those sellers who crack the code, who develop a perspective for the buyer, start looking at things from the buyer's perspective. Data shows average seller's win rate is 17% and an elite seller's win rate is 62%, right? We're not talking 5%, 10% difference. We're talking an absolute humongous difference in win rates. And looking at things from that buyer's perspective, we believe is the central pillar of that mindset.
When I hear you say that, I think some might say, well, we're kind of doing that, right? We're training our people on our personas and the different personas in an organization, and we want to look at the account research and things like that. But you're actually talking about it a little bit differently. And you talk about the personality AI and its role in buyer intelligence. So curious if we can go just dig a little bit deeper. When we talk about personality-based insights to help sales teams either personalize their outreach or work a deal to increase win rates, what do you mean by that?
See, let's ask a basic question. Who's buying?
Individuals.
Right? Who's buying? Absolutely. It's not the personas buying, right? See, persona, we are working with persona because we don't have anything better. Because we don't know Randy, we know Randy's role at Nectar, right? So we've been limited to selling at a persona level. If the technology now to move from a persona to person, right? So we like to say stop selling to the persona, start selling to the person, becomes available, then it's a no-brainer, would you not? And that is what personality AI brings to the mix. It helps me, of course, understand you as a revenue leader, as a particular role, particular ICP, but it also helps me understand who's Randy. How does Randy think? What matters to Randy? What scares Randy? What excites Randy? Can Randy take risk? Can Randy not take risk? How do I build a relation? It makes it about you as the individual, because you will ultimately decide, or a combination of you and a couple of your colleagues, essentially a collection of individuals, is what makes a decision. And if I can get through to each individual, it's a no-brainer that my odds of success will go up significantly.
Yeah, I think in the world that we're living in today, we're all leaving some kind of a breadcrumb through our different social channels, right? That tells us a little bit more about who we are. But I'm curious, if I've never spoken to a prospect or it's the first time reaching out to an organization, how do y'all capture the individual insights on whether they're risk averse or how they want to be communicated with? How does that work?
So I think you might be familiar, a lot of enterprise sellers tend to be familiar with a personality prediction model called DISC. It's called DISC profile. Now what we have done is we've built a proprietary AI model that can take in data about a person that is out there on the public internet. LinkedIn is a big part of that today, but it is already looking beyond LinkedIn, so it is not limited to LinkedIn. That goes into our AI model that we've built and fine-tuned over years. It wasn't an easy problem to solve. And that model can now spit out your DISC profile. So that we can now leverage to, and there's a lot of research that shows what kind of DISC types will behave in what manner. That's one part. Then of course we combine it with whatever else we can learn about you from the public internet, what your interests are, what your hobbies are, what you talk about. There's a lot more that we can learn while staying respectful of privacy and absolutely being privacy cognizant, purely limiting it to public data. This becomes the profile of a person in the Humantic AI world. And this profile then now can be used for guiding a seller on a first meeting. It can be used to, in one click, write a personalized message in a way that is likely to be appealing to the recipient. So that's how this whole thing comes together.
So in the world that we're living in right now, most of the time people are throwing in some information into GPT and saying, write me an email, and it's spitting out fairly generic. And a lot of times we can tell when something was written by AI or not. You're customizing it at the individual level based on whatever breadcrumbs that they've left across different social channels. Is that correct?
Absolutely individual level, but I would say not just individual level. See, individual level, like I know there's tools out there that'll say, oh, I saw on LinkedIn that you wrote a post yesterday about ABC. Now that is also at an individual level, but that's pretty superficial, right? So the key here is at the individual level, how deep you can go. Now, because of the personality part, that's becomes our secret sauce. We even know where the opening should be. Hey, Randy, what a beautiful day. Versus, Randy, it's very nice to meet you. I hope you're doing well today. People just go with otherwise formulas. Hey, you should never say, I hope you're doing well today. I can tell you there is a kind of a person out there who's extremely formal, and where if you don't use that, they will actually think that this was very rude. This was very rude start to an email. So that ability to talk in the language, words, tone, emotion, because ultimately it is emotion that makes us do things. Something has to stir that emotion, and that emotion is really what we try to bring to the table. And that email doesn't look like a ChatGPT written email because it knows you a lot better, right? The prospect, the recipient a lot better, a lot deeper.
So I had a chance to glance at the website, and you all working with some really powerhouse companies, right? AWS, Cushman and Wakefield, Medtronic. So a lot of companies are using Humantic AI. Without maybe naming the specific company, I'm just wondering if you could share some specific examples where, integrating Humantic AI and the buyer personality insights led to tangible improvements in either sales effectiveness or win rates or whatever case studies maybe you'd like to share.
So I'll give you a slightly funny one first, and then I'll get into something specific. So our YouTube channel has a lot of videos. There's a playlist there called Customer Stories. And we had a CRO come on a video last year or something. And we said, hey, well, what's been the impact? Have you measured the impact? He said, we were around 15%, and now our win rate has gone up to around 50%. Yeah, wow. 15 to 50. And I was telling my team, I said, guys, this is not a very good testimonial because people are not going to believe it, right? They'll say this guy is just, maybe Humantic guys asked him to say something random, right? And then I think now we have 3 CROs, right? 3 CROs there, essentially saying the same thing. We had someone, I think a testimonial video we posted just last month. He said they were around 19 to 20% win rate, and now they're around 61%, right? That's on our website. We have something called the results book. It's a collection of sort of 6 short stories, we call it, 6 case studies, micro case studies. And the numbers there are mind-boggling, I'll tell you that. They seem too good to be true. For example, we worked recently with a company publicly listed in the DevSecOps space. We did a measurement exercise comparing a control group and a test group. Our mandate was to deliver 30% improvement in pipeline. We delivered 49% for one group, and we delivered 151% for another group. We have, and this is public, I can name the company, we have Domo, which is another publicly listed company, NASDAQ listed company, their chief data officer and their VP business development on video on our YouTube channel. They measured something of the order of 37% improvement in win rates. Now, and they believe that not all of that was Humantic AI because there were other factors. It is on video. They say that anywhere between 15 to 30%, wow, was, that's just, few names there. Randy, when you're talking about a company that does $100 million right in revenue and adds $30 million every year, let's just say for a minute, 37% or 30% or even 20% improvement, we are talking another $10 million, another $7 million on top of what they have been doing. And not just that, and that's what I think some of the accolades we've had. Gartner puts 5 companies on its list of cool vendors every year, just 5. There's thousands of sales AI companies, 5. We are one of those 5. On G2 in sales AI, we are number 3 globally again. So we are taught at 3 universities today. We are part of coursework. And it's not us, if I have to wrap it up, it is that what we bring to the table, that ability for sellers to adopt a buyer-first mindset, I think that is the fundamental change that we enable. Otherwise, I mean, a product is just a product, right? A tool is just a tool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies give lip service to, we are customer obsessed, or we focus on the customer, and those are great things to talk about, like, to the street.
Yes.
But how you actually operationalize that in your sales plays and is a different story, right? So we talk about win rates and we talk about pipeline. Those are the 2 ends of the spectrum. And so I'm curious, how does a company operationalize a technology like Humantic AI? Is it something that you're working with your marketing teams as they're trying to generate leads? Or is that something that once the leads are passed over, the sales reps then apply? And then I would assume there's a couple parts of my question. And then the third part would be, as the deal's kind of unfolding and new people are being brought in, you're looking probably at the personality profiles of all the people that make up the buying committee. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's a question.
Sure. Yes. We typically work with marketing teams, but most often we work with RevOps teams. So RevOps and the sales leadership is what we work with. We are a pretty enterprise-ready product. So we have multiple pieces that people will use at the right place. For example, we have a web application, of course, that's standard, but we have a browser extension for Firefox as well as for Chrome as well as for Edge. And with that, you can access Humantic Insights on Salesforce, on LinkedIn, on HubSpot, on Salesloft, anywhere that you are. Then we have an integration into all major platforms like the outreach platforms, SEPs like Salesloft and Outreach and Groove and HubSpot. Mm-hmm. Inside them, you can click one button and it'll rewrite an email for the recipient. Yeah. We have an Outlook app that you can use within Outlook desktop client, and it will do the same thing. Then we have the buying committee maps. My point is, what I'm trying to say is, if you are a BDR and SDR, you will use us inside Salesloft and HubSpot and Outreach, etc., to personalize emails. We're the only personalization provider that provides personalization for calling. So you will not really make the same call to everyone anymore. Mm-hmm. We have an integration inside LinkedIn where you can personalize connection requests and emails and whatnot inside LinkedIn. Then it moves to the AE, and the AE will use us to prepare for a meeting. In fact, we've just launched a second product called MIA, which is account intelligence, account research. So they will use that to prepare for that meeting. Then they will use something called a buying committee map when more stakeholders come into the picture. So the point is, the product is mapped to every step of the seller's journey in a way that they can operate at every step in a buyer-aware manner. That is how the product comes to life.
It's really fascinating. So a lot of companies struggle with misalignment between sales and marketing, right? And so without getting too far into the weeds of how different functions are measured on different goals and different outcomes, I'm curious, when you look at marketing who's running a campaign and they spend $100,000 on a campaign and they want to get X amount of MQLs out of that, and hopefully, Y amount of opportunities fall out of that. If I'm hearing you correct, it's at every stage. So you can work with marketing to say, before you just blanket these general campaigns, apply the Humantic filter on those contacts that are part of the campaign. So then as you pass it over to sales, they may have the filter already applied, or it's something the rep applies afterwards. Is that accurate?
Almost. Typically, we do less work with marketing teams. A lot of the work that we do, the product, the way that it enables is it's focused on one-to-one activities. So you can do a few one-to-many activities. Marketing tends to be one-to-many. So for example, we have data integration inside HubSpot and inside Salesloft and so on. If you want to send a sequence, you could personalize. But I would say our primary user is a seller who doesn't have a bulk sales motion, typically an enterprise seller, large deal seller. Yep. And their main focus is to walk in prepared with company intelligence as well as people intelligence, and using that to personalize every step. So that is more typically our user. That's why marketing teams or SMB sales teams that have a volumetric motion are typically not our customers.
Yeah, I love what you just said there. Account intelligence versus people or person intelligence, because I think that's where a lot of companies right now, or a lot of individuals will focus on the account intelligence side of things. And they think personalization is about, hey, this is where you went to school, right? And that's not what it is. Yes. And so as you are working in more complex deals and more people are getting involved, you're applying the Humantic profile across the different buying committee members and understanding sort of the different dynamics of the individuals of the buying committee. Is that right?
Yes, that's a big piece, because what happens is sellers typically work with 2 to 3 stakeholders that they get to know well, but there's 5 to 10 other stakeholders behind the scenes, and literally 80% of the times it's one of them who kills your deal.
How many times have you been involved in deals and there's been 6 or 7 people on the call and 2 people don't say a word the entire call, right? But they're the silent killers.
Yes. They say deals are lost in rooms that sellers never step in, right? That is exactly what happens. When you're not there, there's someone there. You have no idea about, how they think, what matters to them. You believe your champions really got it. But with Humantic AI is going to go and tell you, saying, hey, tell your champion that John Smith generally, is going to have a very, very skeptical take on this. And that's the kind of a person where we need to feed more white papers, we need to feed more information compared to Jane Smith, who's driven by stories and where you just have to send them some collateral where there's a senior leader on video. You have to treat people differently. Right? You have to treat them as unique individuals. You can't treat them the same way, right? I mean, they're not personas, they're persons.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're starting to get into a topic that I'm personally passionate about, which is buyer enablement, which is how do we help our buyers sell when we're not in the room? And
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yes. That's extremely important, especially today. Absolutely critical because committees are making, like Gartner says, average 12 or 14 people are involved in a decision. And I have seen personally too, Randy, 20 years ago, a strong leader who's aggressive and goal oriented will override their team and say, hey, you know what? I bought this tool. Now go and use it. People don't do that today. I mean, today's leaders, they tend to be a lot more inclusive. They will, even if they know there is value, and if someone doesn't come along, I've seen people don't override as often. So it's extremely critical today to enable your buyers for success.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I think is really interesting is Sixth Sense came out with some research late last year talking about how buyers will get through about 70% of their journey without ever wanting or needing to talk to sales.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's up to us as salespeople to find a reason for them to talk with us earlier because we don't want to wait until they're 70% of the way through, especially if we're not one of the top companies in the space. So we've got to find a way to get them to take that meeting earlier, which I think is really what Humantic's doing, is helping us understand why do they want to take that meeting earlier. Speak to me. Give me a reason to talk with you earlier, which I think is really, really fascinating.
So that's something we feel very passionately about. So in fact, the two questions I like to pose to sales leaders when I'm speaking to them, it is one of them. See, sales and sellers, salespeople, if you really think salespeople move the world, right? I mean, without sales, what is going to be happening? There's nothing happens, right? Commerce exists, industry exists because salespeople sell. They enable everything.
Yep.
Why? But how many kids grow up, Randy, wanting to be salespeople? Have you ever met a kid who's like, yeah, when I grow up, I'm going to be a salesperson? Like, why?
Yeah.
And that's why 70% of the selling happens where sellers are not, because sellers have not managed to garner that respect and love from buyers, because we just see sellers as, just put them, like, you interact with a seller when you cannot not interact with a seller. Like, it's your last choice, more or less.
Yeah.
But
unless you can find that
funny thing that people... Exactly, right? Exactly. Unless you can find that 1 in 10, 1 in 50, 1 in 100 rep. But I'll tell you something interesting that people don't know. Very few people know this. You know which profession today, which is highly respected, highly regarded, was treated in a similar manner 500 years ago?
I don't. Tell me.
Medicine. Doctors. Medicine. Can you believe that? So today, I've asked people, hey, what do you think is the most respectable profession? Either people say defense forces, right, army and whatnot, or they will say medicine, doctors. 500 years ago, which is not a long time in the big scheme of things, doctors were seen as quacks, charlatans, like you will go to a doctor when you have no other option. But doctors, so if doctors can get there, why can't sellers get there? And our belief is the road to that is when I start putting you first. I have been on calls, and see, I am an engineer turned seller. 2 weeks ago, talking to a really, really big company. I can't say their fortune rank because that'll give them away. But really, really, Fortune 10, let's just call it, right? And things are moving along fine. Then things get a little bit stuck because they've got some other initiatives. So they're like, yeah, we love this, but it'll need a little bit more time. One of their leaders, I reach out, I'm like, hey, let's try to understand. Comes on a call and he's like, look, I am on this call because I have absolutely respected and loved the way you guys have sold so far. Mm-hmm. The point is, Randy, I'm not a career seller, right? I'm not a salesperson. I was building. My first love is still building things, right? But I believe this is what has enabled me, because when I go into a conversation, I am looking at everything from your perspective, right? I am saying, okay, can we help? will this work? Will this not? What is this person thinking? What's on their mind? What are the doubts? And to me, that difference is really what we want that to happen, not for 1 out of 20 reps, but we want it to happen for all 20, but at least 5 out of 20 or 10 out of 20.
Yeah. If you can take your bottom 25% and just catch them even up to 50%, that has a dramatic improvement on your revenue outcomes.
I think AI in general today, not just us, but AI in general, I like to think of it as wings for the flyers and crutches for the walkers.
Yeah.
Right? So the top performers can just fly, and those who are not top performers, they can at least walk. They will not at least stall. So that's what AI can do as long as you're open to it and you adopt it well.
Yeah. So that's a great segue to one of my questions, and maybe less so about Humantic specifically, but more around just AI tools, right? Because everybody's coming out with an AI this or that of their product. When you speak with prospects and customers, what do you think some of the main challenges are that sales teams are facing when just adopting AI tools, and how can they overcome that?
So I think the number one challenge we see is there's just, every space, but sales AI space is just overcrowded. People are so confused with bazillion options that are coming at them, right? People don't know. And see, fact is, sales leaders, right, RevOps or revenue, fundamentally they are not technologists, right? They are sellers.
Yeah.
So it's unlike engineering, the CTO or the CPO, who are fundamentally technologists. They know technology very well. They can evaluate well. Salespeople. So I think it's just jarring. The amount of cognitive dissonance for sales leaders today is just crazy. Confuses them a lot. And our advice to them is saying, look, just go back to the basics, go back to fundamentals, see what is important. Don't look at shiny new tools and say, oh, this is cool, that is great. Go bottom up, look at your problems, right? I know what you do at Nectar, for example. Salespeople using the CRM has been a fundamental problem, right, forever, right? And if now AI can automate that, that's a big problem that can be solved, right? So start with the problems and then tie that into solutions rather than starting with solutions and trying to force fit into problems.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Like the best demos, or I should say the best discovery calls that I've listened to have been the ones where we've gotten through almost the entire time and we haven't even talked about the product or the solution. We're starting on the problems,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then at that point, it's like, go back to your doctor analogy. The doctor walks in and takes a look at you and says, oh, you need to have this, that, and change your diet and everything. Without even asking any questions, how do they know what's wrong, right? They've got to ask the right questions to figure out what the right diagnosis is. Yeah, I love that analogy. So before I move on to what I would consider to be our lightning round, which is a little bit more personal and lighter, what questions haven't I asked you about Humantic or the being buyer-focused at an individual level should I have asked you that you maybe want to bring up for our listeners?
I think you've actually asked some great questions. In fact, you've covered most of the pieces that I think are relevant. But I'll double click on one thing that you said. You already said it, but I'll double click. And because this makes for a really fun conversation. You go in and I'll say, hey, Mr. CRO or Mr. VP Sales or Miss SVP, would you say that you are a customer obsessed company? You really put your customers first, right? And they'll say, of course, without a doubt, right? Like you said, everyone says, yes, we are.
Yeah.
And I'll say, okay. This is going to be a little hard, but what do you do today to actually treat your customers in a customer-obsessed manner?
Great question.
And it's just interesting because then they'll be like, oh well, we do. You can see, right? And I'm like, look, if I told you that there was a technology that actually helps you walk that talk, right? But it's very new and you haven't heard of it and it's going to seem unbelievable and almost too good to be true. Would you keep an open mind and look at it? So that's a very interesting conversation. We all talk that we are this and we are that, we're customer first, but it is really rare and very few who walk that talk. Yeah. That's the reason you see some of our customers being large companies. What we've seen is they actually, it's weird, but they actually tend to walk that talk. They tend to focus on these things a lot more than smaller companies, which they're just trying to hustle and just make their number right often enough rather than truly being strategic. So that's, an interesting conversation. It's always a fun one. Some people don't like it, but makes the point at least.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let me ask you some more of the sort of lighthearted, fun, personal questions. So you're two times founder, CEO. You obviously enjoy what you're doing, right? What's your favorite part about building a startup like Humantic?
I think the impact, I'm very, very impact driven. Yeah. So whenever I think about, there's, I don't know, 10,000 people out there who are able to do things differently and better, right? And like I said, we're very mission driven because of us. So that's a very fulfilling thought, I would say. Makes it all worth a while.
Now, there's always going to be a flip side to that question, which is least favorite. Or I often ask the question a little bit different, and I say, what's really hard about being the founder of an AI startup right now?
There's just so many things that are hard. I can give you a list of so many things, but two big ones come to mind. One is again on the same customer side, because what we do is relatively new. I think it's becoming more and more established, but we have to help people see that point, right? So it's not like, oh yes, absolutely yes, because when they don't even know that something is possible, it's a sort of a long walk, even if makes a ton of sense. And I've said earlier, our results are absolutely stellar, absolutely verifiable. We've got dozens of people on video, dozens and dozens, big companies, small companies, and everything in between. But it is still hard for people to just look past their, I would say, presumptions and their pre-held notions. So that part, it pains you a little bit because you're like, hey, hold on, is this not visible? Like, this is not apparent. So yeah. I think that's one of the harder things, but it's part of the game.
It's part of the game, absolutely. You mentioned an engineer by trade and a builder of things, and sales is somewhat new. You've had to sell in your past two startups, but is there a sales book or methodology that you subscribe to that you think is really good that kind of stands out in your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm generally a big fan of learning, and one of the questions I like to ask in my interviews is, how do you learn outside of your job? And those who don't learn outside of their job, I'm like, are you really trying to even be better? So I think I read it on. There's a lot of sales books that I really, really admire, right? That I've really come to value. But I'm trying to think if there's one single book. I would say I'll have to give you 3-4 books probably. So I think one book that I read most recently is Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference.
Great book.
It tells you the role of psychology, right, in selling. And I have been actually applying that, and I would say with pretty visible results. Before that, I actually read a book called Buyer First. The book is called Buyer First. So that's a great book. And again, I have a little bit of a bias, right, because that's something we believe in strongly. And then I think another book that I read, it's by the Challenger Method authors. So it's called The Jolt Effect. The Jolt Effect.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yes. So these are 2-3 I would say that are fresh on my mind. Great books, a lot of learning, yeah.
Well, have you happened to read a book? It's only been out about a year, called Selling With?
I've actually heard of it, but I'm wondering, it's like really fresh on my mind. But who's the author? Remind me.
Nate Narsala is the author. He started a company around. Yeah.
Fluent.
Fantastic book, and I think fits so well into what you all are doing right now.
Great guy. He's one of the people very original thinker, really good content, not just fluffy content. Yeah. So he's someone I follow on LinkedIn pretty actively to see what his thoughts are. So I haven't read the book. That's exactly why I've seen it, but I got to read that because I find Nate to be a very intelligent guy.
Fantastic book. And like I said, a lot of the principles that he talks about around buyer enablement, how do we help, our main point of contact sell this when we're not in the room. I think you'll find the book really interesting. So last two questions I have for you. So any advice that you received earlier in your career that's stuck with you even through today?
Yeah, I think we're talking about sales. So something is fresh in my mind. So I think I didn't get into it, but my earlier startup, I spoke about this is my second AI startup, right? So even from an AI perspective, that was a fairly well-recognized, startup. We'd been on a bunch of covers and whatnot. And like at some point, Wall Street Journal called us technology that will reshape the world. Forrester, when it did its first ever list of AI-enabled consumer intelligence product, we were on that. We've had some good accolades. But At one point, I think one of my investors in my last startup, he's like, Amarpreet, if you could sell as well as you can build, you will just fly. And I had that stereotypical negative impression of sellers. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to become that kind of a guy, right? The sales kind of a guy. And I'm okay just happy being a builder. But at some point I said, you know what? Let me change it. And hey, why? I mean, I don't have to be a stereotypical sleazy seller, right? There must be a good kind of a seller. So that journey, I would say I became a student of selling, started around 5 years ago. And that challenge, I wouldn't say, advice, it was more of a challenge, has really shaped and even turned me into a better person. I'm just not a better salesperson, I'm a better person. And I have not taken the stereotypical, just somehow meet my numbers route. I have genuinely learned to take this customer first approach, and I really enjoy helping others. Like I said, the 10,000 who've adopted it, and hopefully it'll be 100,000 soon and 1,000,000 soon enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question. And for those folks who maybe want to learn a little bit more about you and personally, like what you like, so as a founder, I'm sure most of your time is spent building the company, right? But you probably get away and try to decompress a little bit. What do you enjoy doing on your free time?
Motorcycles. I'm a motorcycles guy.
Really?
A little bit of speed, like I'm in a hotel room right now, and across the freeway is a go-karting track. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I should just go there and unwind for 30 minutes. So motorcycles and racing's kind of my cup of tea. And fitness, so that's a little bit, yeah.
I was going to ask a follow-up question. Is it racing bikes, or is it more like a Harley? What kind of bike do you like?
I love all kind of motorcycles, like as long as it's a motorcycle. But I would say I enjoy dirt the most, so
dirt bikes.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, listen, this was a really fantastic episode. I appreciate your insights. I think our listeners will as well. Before we wrap up, if anyone wants to reach out to you and learn more, what's the best way to do that?
Well, luckily, while my name's hard to pronounce, but that also makes it a fairly unique name. I'm the only Amarpreet Kalkat around. So on LinkedIn, if you go /Amarpreet Kalkat, on Twitter, if you go /Amarpreet Kalkat, I'm fairly easy to look up.
Yep, and I'll just say that as a person who loves also student of sales and loves learning, you've got really great content on your LinkedIn. So I'd encourage anyone to go connect with you and learn more about you. So Amarpreet, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. That is another episode of the Revenue Lounge. Thanks everybody for listening. Take care.
Thank you, Randy. It's just a pleasure. Like I said, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.